Welcome back to the NFL Pick 6 show. It's week number 7. NFL Pick 6, of course, sponsored by Thrive. We'll talk about them later on in the show. Joined, as always, two of the sharpest minds in the business, Rich Hribar, Sharp Football Analysis, John Daigle, 4 for 4, and BetSperts. Oh, man. Daigle, what's going on, dude? How was week 6 for you? Week 7 we'll talk about in a second, but I guess we can look back for a second. Is there anything, it's generally a forward-thinking show, but is there anything worth shining a light on, or we just want to move on, pretend like it didn't happen?
Too much Kyler Murray, forward-thinking show. Everyone can move on from here.
Yeah, I actually had my best week of the season.
Nice.
But I did have too much Kyler as well, like independent of that. How about yourself, Rich? Any thoughts as far as week 6?
Oh, yeah, third week in a row we're in the green, so we'll take it. Feel good about where we are in the season right now, man. It feels like we're getting stronger as we move.
Yeah, and we're collecting more and more data. We know more and more things. Now we're at week 7. Week 7, man, it's just an 11-gamer because there's some buys out there, and the tricky part is there are some really good players not playing. There's no Buffalo, there's no Eagles, no Vikings, no Rams.
The meta, what are we going to do without Josh Allen?
Yeah, Josh Allen, no Hurts, no receivers, right? No Cooper Kupp, no Diggs, no Jefferson, no Brown. Of course, there's no Thursday night stuff, no Arizona, no Saints, no Pittsburgh, no Miami on Sunday nights, and no Chicago or New England. Kind of thankfully on that one.
Also, you should be playing. This year was a great example. Like, if you're playing like any cash lineups, like you should be playing Thursday through Sunday. Like, get in on Thursday nights because people will roster players in these terrible games.
I used to do that a ton, and that's a great point. And like the reason why is that people want instant gratification. Of course, There is no gratification because it's like the Broncos versus the Bears or whatever, and you're just miserable. And you like lock up 3 spots watching the game on Thursday night. Now you're playing catch up and you're dead essentially.
But dudes will be putting like Curtis Samuel in lineups and stuff just because they want to have someone to root for.
Yeah, and you don't need to make a lineup. Just backload it. Just put put in a dummy lineup and you figure it out later. And it's funny you mentioned that. I used to do it all the time, and I have not done that in a while
because these games have been terrible. Not many NFL games have been good this year, but these Thursday night games have been particularly trash.
Well, the Denver Broncos are actually on the main slate, so maybe the edge is on. I don't know. Oh man, we'll be talking about them soon enough. Of course, if you're first time here, do appreciate y'all hanging out with us. If you're on with us on YouTube, hit that like button, do subscribe, and turn on those notifications, and feel free to chime in the chat. I got my eye on there. Most of the people listening to this on the replay, if you guys aren't aware, we record this on a Wednesday night. We do our best. It's kind of a first look podcast. Of course, things will change. The slate, as always, is fluid. 11-gamer. We always talk about 3 main games. Daigle focuses on those. We'll be talking about those in a second. Well, we all focus on them, but Daigle selects them. I went 3 for 3, Daigle. I finally got it. I figured it out. Usually I go 2 for 3. I'm like, oh, these are the ones we're going to pick. I hit the trifecta. I don't know what I win. I just play this game in my head before the email comes. But, it was pretty straightforward.
I try to avoid the Cardinals every week, first of all. So that was automatically eliminated for us. And then the seas sort of parted. Oh, like these 3 highest totals of the week are actually like the 3 most naturally interesting games. Like we can talk Bengals Falcons whenever we get to positional plays. It sucks because Burrow isn't an actually great spot after the week where he single-handedly won tournaments on DraftKings. But overall, also, it's really hard to pick players to roster on the Falcons. So can't really talk that game since we could ignore the Falcons or fantasy. And these 3 games just make the most sense.
But Kyle Pitts plays for the Falcons. We're just going to completely ignore them?
He does get 3 catches. You are correct. Yes.
We called exactly what was going to happen with Jamar Chase last week on Wednesday night. We knew it was going to happen. He was going to get steamed up, and it was going to be his time. Dean even brought up the LSU narrative.
I was the first person to say it.
It all happened. And Burrow shows up to the game in the Jamar Chase LSU game-worn jersey. It was all just on full display.
He rope-a-doped you a little bit. It took him a while to get there, but he got there in the end. It wasn't even close. He made it interesting, but
Bengals will do that to you. Zach Taylor's never going to make it easy for us.
And I will say, you guys, I can't remember who it was, but it might have been both of y'all, like talking about the Kansas City receivers. We'll talk about Kansas City in a second, but you guys flat out said that MVS, this is not an dirt in the hand in the dirt, that kind of thing. The setup as far as the defense, it's a bad spot. And I was like, you scored a touchdown. I played them. So what do these guys know? And then, of course, they take that touchdown down, and MVS did not spell or touch the ball the rest of the
I've been
game.
meaning to look up. I feel like they're calling illegal man downfield at like the highest rate I've ever seen it. Like this penalty like never existed for 20 years, like in the NFL. Now it's like called twice a game.
Like it was like an O lineman, I guess. That's not
it was an RPO play where like the center got like a yard downfield and it negated that touchdown.
Yeah, that was I ended up with too much of him, but somehow I found the right lineup in a couple spots. So hopefully
you can run it back with MVS this week if you want.
I mean, do I want to though? We'll talk about it. Yeah, it's gonna. That's one of the 3 main games. Spoiler alert! And then, like you guys suggested, after we talk about the 3 main games, we run it back and talk about our fair plays, position by position, that are not in the 3 featured game, 11 game slate. We talk the main slate here. Very first game we're going to be talking about is Detroit at Dallas. Dallas 7-point favorite, 48-point total. John, we're expecting some players to come back. 49, I guess. I wrote this up last night, and I guess it's changed on the fly. My apologies. I've been flooded with basketball all day today, so my brain's all over the place. NBA season, 12-gamer. They're not messing around. John, we're assuming that Prescott comes back this week, and it looks like Swift is progressing, and it looks positive that he's going to be back as well for Detroit. Is that where we're at on a Wednesday night?
I believe that's where we're at. And we can go ahead and start with the Lions side, because prior to their week 5 matchup, when all the injuries caught up to them, which they eventually would against the Patriots, we saw this Lions team before then still rank top in the league in yards per play. Still a ferocious offense. Lions also still right now after their bye ranked 2nd in the league in yards before contact per attempt. And that's how you're going to attack Dallas, most likely. Cowboys have allowed the 6th most runs this year of 10 plus yards on the ground. So assuming we get Swift back, Jamal Williams mixing back in, led the league in carries inside the 5-yard line while Swift was healthy prior to becoming a bell cow. I think we will get some push here. And getting push matters because we've seen Jared Goff basically be volatile. The pendulum swings in either direction. When the Lions hang around and score points in a competitive game, Jared Goff has 2 finishes this year of top 10 quarterback, including QB1 overall of the week against the Seahawks. His 3 other games were outside the top 20. Not even an option you would ever consider. So as long as we get some pushback from the Lions and the Cowboys and a healthy Prescott in particular, I think all the what's the analogy I'm looking for? All the boats rise from the tide. There you go.
A rising tide lifts all boats.
There you go. Yeah.
Lifts all ships, something like that.
There you go. And judges would it's ships, boats, close enough. But I just pulled it up here. Schultz did practice in full for Dallas today, as did Prescott with his thumb. I'm trying to find the Detroit stuff. You happen to have the Detroit stuff here, Rich, as far as Swift and everybody else? I really love for their linemen.
Swift looks like he's trying to come back. Neither Shark or Josh Reynolds practiced today, which coming out of the bye, not the greatest of signs. So keep an eye on that for them coming back for like your cheapy bring back types of guys. But other than that, Amon-Ra looks good. He looks good to go. He's the guy we really care about anyway. So as long as the Sun God and Swift are coming back, those are the 2 playmakers we really care about.
Yeah, and we're in a dome game too. Detroit got shut out there in New England when they were on the road. Of course, they're not home this time. They're still in a dome against Dallas. Pretty solid defense, obviously. Rich, what do you have as far as the Lions? I guess you want to talk about Amon-Ra.
I mean, he's the best player they have. So, I mean, for fantasy, I mean, he's before the bye, he was targeted on 33.3% of his routes. Only Tyreek Hill targeted a higher rate per route run than he has so far this season. And that's even mixing in a game where, he basically was just kind of out there and like dressed versus New England, hurt that rate a little bit, playing just 32% of the snaps, had half mass. So he's coming back. I mean, it's not like the greatest of matchups, but like Dallas hasn't played a lot of good quarterbacks. So it's like really hard to tell. Like Dan Quinn's done a really good job. We know there's a lot of talent on that defense. They haven't really like faced a lot of good offenses, and they haven't really been like particularly the greatest when it comes to defending slot receivers versus boundary receivers. They're 22nd in catch rate allowed to opposing slot receivers, 15th in yards per target right in the middle. They've allowed 3 touchdowns to those guys. Like nothing really stands out. But so when you look at Dallas's like quarterback schedule so far, there's nothing that really stands out outside of Jalen Hurts. So I don't think it's going to be a situation where we're like running and hiding from the Detroit guys, especially, if they're getting a little bit healthier here and healthier on the offensive line as well, which helps out against Dallas. Cause we do know that the one thing we can bank on their defense that is true is they can rush the passer.
I think the more interesting conversation here is Dak, and the tricky part again is we talk about this week. We're missing a lot of good quarterbacks. Hurts and Allen from the top for sure. We'll talk about some others that are pretty. Lamar. We'll talk about Mahomes, but in optimals on a Wednesday night, on FanDuel, the most popular quarterback right now is Dak Prescott, getting a bit of a discount against Detroit. Detroit, a horrendous defense, obviously 7.5K on FanDuel. On DK, the second most popular. We got Derek Carr just in front of him. He's just really, really cheap on DK at 5.9K. I mean, is it wait and see for you, Rich, as far as Prescott, or like if he's out there, we assume he's good to go, and that's that?
Yeah, it's tricky. So historically, I'm pretty cautious on players coming off of long injuries for multi-absence, and quarterbacks especially. They tend to underperform. It is a hand injury too, like a thumb injury, so it's kind of dicey. If he comes in really popular, it's probably going to be hard to like really buy in. It's a really tough spot, like from an injury stance, but then it's a really great spot on paper, right? Like everything about the Lions is absolutely terrible. They're 26th in passing points allowed per game. They're 21st in completion rate allowed, 25th in touchdown rate allowed, 29th in yards per pass attempt allowed. I mean, Bailey Zappi made his first career start, and granted, he basically played the whole game the week before against the Packers, but threw 4 incompletions, an average of 9 yards per pass attempt. Like, where we don't think Dak Prescott, even not at 100%, is like capable of performing here. And what's really interesting though is what Dak does from a top-down stance for the Cowboys, right? So from weeks 2 through 6, like after Dak got hurt, like the Cowboys just packed everything in and were like very insular. Like they weren't challenged to score very many points. They just didn't put Cooper Rush in any situations to throw unless they had to. They were 8% below pass rate expectation. That's where you look for Dak to make an impact, right? Like this team is 30th in rate of drives to get to the red zone under Cooper Rush. Like that's where you're looking for like Dak Prescott now to raise, like like Daigle said, to raise the ships up. They're 30th in red zone plays run. Zeke Elliott has 4 red zone touches on the year. He has 86 touches this year, and he has 4 red zone touches. Wow. Obviously he gets like the great run out against the Lions if they can get there in the red zone. But what it really stands out too is they're going to be more aggressive and have more chances to score. The player that really stands out is CeeDee Lamb, because all of CeeDee Lamb's rate stats are among the league best. I mean, he has 33% of the team targets. That's number 1 in the NFL. He is seen at least 27% of the team targets in every game this year. He's been targeted on 31% of his routes. That's 4th in the league, but they have no pass value to this point. So if Dak's going to get there and they're going to be more aggressive and they're going to throw the football more and have more chances to score than they've had before, like a guy like CeeDee Lamb looks like he's about ready to like be what we thought we were drafting at the 1-2 turn, instead of a guy that's just like treaded water through the Cooper Rush weeks.
Yeah, and a week with no Diggs and no Kupp and no Jefferson and no AJ Brown. The most popular player right now on DK, as far as my optimals, it very, very clearly is CeeDee Lamb, and I believe he's first on FanDuel as well. So Brandon Cook's just a bet ahead of Lamb, basically 1 and 1A on FanDuel for what it's worth. John, same question.
Optimizer pick of Brandon Cooks.
Yeah, I mean,
Brandon Cooks and Zay Jones every week.
I even said, like, I was looking at the matchups, and off the top of my head, I said, "Oh, Brandon Cooks is probably a good play." And I go and look, and like early projections are him being like a top 3 wide receiver roster. It's I should have figured that, of course.
Mm-hmm. In a dome against the Raiders, playing catch up, like it all kind of makes sense until you realize he's attached to Houston and it's Brandon Cooks. Daigle, your thoughts as far as Prescott? The other thing is Prescott's like right now probably going to be in a lot of cash games, which you're supposed to be quote unquote safer in cash games, at least like floor and all that. I don't know. Maybe I totally get the idea of fading him in tournaments or being lower than the field, but it's an interesting conundrum for cash as well.
Rich already talked about the success other quarterbacks have had, and I think it may help for tournaments. Maybe not, because the salary's so low and everyone knows the matchup, but it may help that the last time we saw him in week 1, it was against a Bucs defense, but he was pitiful. He was so bad, and everyone forgets it because of what we saw about Cooper Rush last week. Under 5 yards per attempt, completed just 48% of his passes before he got injured. But again, that was the Bucs pass rush and a Bucs defense. So completely different matchup overall. I still think the more interesting approach is leveraging off for Ezekiel Elliott. I still think tournament players are not going to be able to hold their nose and roster Elliott, and it's such an amazing matchup. Lions have allowed the league's highest rate of explosive runs, 10 plus yards. The only defense permitting over 4 yards after contact per attempt, and are the only team also allowing at least 25 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. And so if I have an opportunity to perhaps leverage off of a questionable health of Dak Prescott and instead go to the running game, we know they will go to Ezekiel Elliott inside the red zone whenever they get there. So that's the method I still prefer personally.
Last week, 61% snaps for Zeke. That's basically in line for the season, a little bit lower than normal, but somewhere between 61 and 67. Pollard around, 35, 40 in that area. Is that enough for you, Rich, as far as Zeke? I mean, nobody likes playing Zeke. Optimizers will play him, I'm sure. Again, you're going to get it's a home favorite on the turf against a terrible offense, and you pretend it's not Zeke Elliott and you pretend it's not 2023. It's fine. Yeah,
I mean, if you don't,
what's that?
If you don't like him here, then you're just never going to like him, right?
Yeah,
it's one of those situations. He's really cheap. I do prefer him on FanDuel than DraftKings for obvious reasons. I mean, he's just not the one thing is like we say, like Dak can raise the tide of them getting to the red zone and creating scoring opportunities for Zeke, but he still is not he's still conceding a larger share of the backfield touches than he has in any season. He's not catching any passes, and neither is Tony Pollard. This isn't like an either or thing. And even in the game that Dak Prescott played, the running backs didn't catch any passes either. So I mean, it's granted that's a 1-game sample with Dak, but like these guys just haven't been used through the air at all, Elliott or Pollard. So I mean, I think the price is right. I do like him at 6.5 a lot more on FanDuel than the 6 flat on DraftKings, because he's still like in the middle of all of like that run of DraftKings guys, right? Like Breece Hall for some reason still never is getting run up in terms of pricing on DraftKings. Kenneth Walker still like right there. You got still like guys like Dameon Pierce, like guys that are probably just going to catch a little more passes. Josh Jacobs is only 500 more than him on DraftKings. So yeah, but I mean, if you're not going to like Ezekiel Elliott here, like when will you?
He's not going to hit optimals unless you're forcing it, right? That's the way I'm looking at it right now. You mentioned Jacobs, especially on DK. The Jacobs price is really, really good. We'll talk about Walker soon enough as well. And Hall's got a really good price on DK where he's kind of popping. Let's have the conversation about crap tight ends now, because Dalton Schultz is popping, especially on FanDuel, but I think it's a better conversation to have on DK. John, I guess you probably guessed, or you might have looked ahead as far as the crap tight ends that are popping. There's 3 that are like 21 to 33%.
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's
and you're going to get another one.
Oh, well, okay. So Otten is that you're thinking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess we're assuming that Otten's getting 10%. So we're assuming that who's it's going to be sitting. Great. I most likely, like if you look at the video and the way things are going, I'm not a doctor, but I imagine they're going to play it safe. He's not going to play this week. But the number one guy is, he's got that Monday night, the salary did not change. Albert O is, pulled this. He's just gone. He's disappeared. No longer in existence. He was never real to begin with, as far as I know. But yeah, John, we're looking at, well, on DK, this is the one. He was 2.5K or 2.6K, right? Pulling it up now for Denver. 2.5. Dulcich is 2.5K. His salary did not change. And then Noah Fant is grabbing some salary, which is okay.
That's also optimal is always Brandon Cooks and Noah Fant every single week.
Calling out the optimal. He's 3.1. And Schultz on DK, he's really cheap on FanDuel too, but Schultz is 3.6 over there. If he's back, I assume he's full go. And then there's Otten. It just feels like it's cheap punt tight end. We can have the conversation.
Did you say Evan Ingram? I'm surprised he didn't make it in there.
He's got a revenge game, doesn't he?
I think he's 3.3, right, over there?
2%. He's in 2% of lineups.
Oh, okay.
You know who also ended in 2% of lineups? Mark Andrews, who's really, really good, and just every single week just crushes it. Just interesting how that works. But John, do you have
especially when everyone's going to play down? Like people are like Dulcich. Yeah. Dulcich will probably be the cash game chalk.
That's
and like and we'll probably get a lot of Dulcich and a lot of and anyways, even in tournaments, and just because they're so cheap, and probably like we said, if it's the other guys, like man, like you could just bury those guys though if you play Kelsey or Andrews and they go off.
Yeah, that's just kind of how that goes, and that's been sort of the season too. Just play Andrews every single week. Just like don't even think about it. He might have disappointed 1 week or something like that, but do you have a preference? This is why, because we're talking about Dallas. John, you have a favorite amongst this nonsense?
I mean, and you didn't even mention if Donald Parham's ruled out and Keenan Allen is ruled out. Gerald Everett moves into a better spot, and he's roughly 500 to 700 more than those guys. So I also like Gerald Everett too, and spending up from these other guys. I just have a hard time getting there with Dulcich. Everyone's always excited about a rookie, so it's usually overblown when we talk about these players. But just a 10.7% target share, and he did run around on 81% of dropbacks in his first game back. That's great. But how he got there on just 10% of the targets with that long touchdown on broken coverage, and for a bad offense, we don't want to play anyways. Like even Cortland Sutton, even though it was against Sauce Gardner. No, not against Sauce Gardner, even though it was against I don't even remember. It's already week 7 who they played Monday night because they're so bad. Nonetheless, Cortland Sutton struggled to get there as well because the Broncos spread the ball out to 10 different receivers in the first quarter. So overall, like I don't mind fading Broncos tight end. Like that doesn't bother me at all. I think I still lean Cade Otton, even though I've been tricked by Tom Brady twice now. I may be fooled into tricking a third time.
You got to see it through now.
Yeah, like we got to keep playing this back. Eventually, it's got to hit.
The touchdown regression.
Leonard Fournette can't score every touchdown for this team a third week in a row. At least that's what I'm telling myself.
Yeah, first Tampa Bay running back in franchise history to catch a touchdown in 3 straight games.
Fool me twice, you ain't gonna fool me again.
Listen, Brady has a 3.2% touchdown rate though, and he's thrown for over 350 yards 3 games in a row. Over 6% touchdown rate the past 2 years with the Bucks. Like I'm just gonna the regression he screamed into the.
We'll talk about Kittle in a second. We'll talk about that Kansas City San Francisco game. Like he was nice to see him get 10 targets last game, and you have to assume, in theory, San Fran might have to push and throw the ball a little bit more in a game against Kansas City. John, you got anything else as far as Dallas and Detroit that we should talk about?
I'll just say, like, if you're not scared to play Dak, like, you can't be scared to play Schultz. Like, his highest target share of the year came in week 1 whenever Dak was under center. You just lock them in. Just play them together.
The only thing I want to see in this game is that Kellen Moore did a really excellent job without Dak Prescott and, like, do smart things with Dak. Don't just go back to being the same Dallas offense. Because, like, Kellen Moore has done this before where, like, he gives us, like, a 4 or 5 week stretch where, like, damn, this dude, like, is just in his bag, and then like they'll just ghost and be like just a really like boring offense again for like another stretch. And I hope Dallas actually does a lot of the creative things, because what they did with CeeDee Lamb for that stretch at Cooper Rush was nothing short of really well executed. And I would love to see CeeDee Lamb continue to be used in that capacity with like an offense that's actually aggressive.
Do you want to say what's up to the chat? I know again a lot of you guys are listening to us on the recording, but if you're listening to us live, we do appreciate that. Kindly hit the like button, do subscribe, turn on those notifications. And I didn't know this. I just learned this in the chat. Rich, did you went into cage match with I assume with Smizzle, right?
Yeah, I was there today. You can go check that out on Smiz's channel. It was a blast. I have to defend my strap because I went in there last year and pulled out a win. So we did a unique wager this week. So you have to check that out.
Oh, nice little tease. I was just going to ask, is it not for charity?
It is for charity, but we got creative with it.
Good. Yeah, I love that concept. It's a lot of fun. Maybe week 17 or year 17, Smiz might invite me on. I would love to participate. It seems like a fun concept.
I think my favorite moment ever was last year, or was it 2 years ago? They all run together. Is that Silva went on, and then he not only put up 10K to start, like literally just came out talking about a 10K matchup, but then also drafted Paris Campbell, like a $3,100 receiver at the time on DraftKings. Like he started with the cheapest person you could jam in possible.
Did he know the rule? Was Paris Campbell a good play that week? I have no idea. Do you recall, or just he was
There's
just
really no way to tell. There's really no way to tell.
And it was a 10K. Like I know it depends upon like whatever they want to put up for charity. You put up 10K for charity?
It was Silva, yeah.
Good.
It was
good
great.
for Silva, man. Oh, well done. And I know Smizzle's got his no kid hungry, which he does a great job with. A lot of people in the DFS, Dinkmeyer's got his welly maker. Oh God, I'm losing the guy who does the Scott Fishbowl, which is incredible work.
Of course. Yeah. It's his birthday today, actually, for real. Not just Travis Mangone showing up and saying happy birthday. It's actually Scott Fish's birthday today.
I fell for that once. I don't know if I believe if it is or it is not, but if it is, happy birthday out there.
Go on Twitter and tell Scott Fish happy birthday. Literally the best of us.
There you go. Seems like he does amazing work. Yeah. Seattle at the Chargers. We can't get rid of Seattle. Seattle at the Chargers, 52.5 total. Chargers 7-point favorite. Rich, dealer's choice. Where do you want to start in this game?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to probably talk about in this game because we finally saw like the Seattle Carnival that kind of ended, right? Like, they looked like the old versions of Seattle where they ran the football, played good defense. And we also had a thing where we tried to create something from the Cardinals offense through the Seattle defense. And we kind of have a similar spot because this Chargers offense, not that hot right now. And it's not just from Monday. Like, we've got a multi-week sample of them really kind of not really being productive with the football. We've got lots of injury stuff to kind of wade through on the Chargers. Keenan Allen was talking about maybe not playing because they're on bye next week. So, like, maybe just kicking this thing and being healthy for the back half. Josh Palmer's in concussion protocol. Justin Herbert's coming off of an ADOT of just 4.2 yards. It was the first time he didn't throw a touchdown since week 13 of 2020. Rough, man. A lot of tough scenes. But Kenneth Walker is really cheap. And it feels like the running backs like the two safest guys in this game, but they're also still the outcome where like could the Carnival come back?
Why is Herbert not throwing? He's got a ridiculous arm. Why? What's that? What's the reasoning for that?
Lots of it's not just one. I mean, it's a couple things. So one, Herbert did this in college too. Like, this is what he did in his college career. His ADOT dropped through college every year, but the offensive line is like an absolute travesty right now. We'll see if Corey Linsley ends up playing, but they've already lost Rashawn Slater for the year. They also have no vertical options. Like, there's no speed receiver. Like, people were talking about Mike Williams on Monday night just getting locked down by Patrick Surtain, but like where Mike Williams, all his routes develop, like that, there was no shot to even get the football to him outside of a few times because of just the pressure. So you have that. There's been the loss of Keenan Allen. And then like the fact that, just he's throwing to a bunch of guys that really inherently require low ADOTs, except for Big Mike. And Big Mike's not like a separator downfield. He's a contested catch guy downfield. So there's a lot of moving factors. And then we can also sprinkle in Joe Lombardi too. Like, let's not absolve him either for all those things.
Is Palmer or Carter not burners? Those guys can't run it? I mean, for some reason, I feel like they're speedsters. I feel like
Carter's like more of like a interior slot guy though, like a vertical slot, but like they don't have like any burner. Like they need like that team, like Herbert needs like a Will Fuller type.
And it's so frustrating because they are trying. They have the fourth most dropbacks on early downs. Herbert's averaging 43 passes per game. But yes, it's just not coming to fruition. Even when they reach the red zone, Herbert's 20 of 42 inside the 20 right now. Like, it's not pretty, the results.
Djax, man, they could have used him. I guess Baltimore got to him first. Does he still have some legs, Djax? 35 years old?
He will always have Thanksgiving last year. That's all I know.
It's true.
One catch, like 80 yards. Is that what it was? Something like that?
We called it. Yeah. And the 3 games late, we got it.
What do you have on the Chargers there, John?
It's just the same thing. Like, on one hand, Seahawks are allowing the fourth highest rate of 15-yard plus throws through the air. So you'd think it would be a great spot for Herbert, but we do need to see how things shake out in the injury report. I am curious how many people go to Austin Eckler. His salary's risen on both sides. I think he's $9,300 on FanDuel. That's quite expensive. But at the same time, it looks like Josh Kelly is definitely out this game. And so there is more touches for Eckler in this spot in particular. And just think about what Seattle's defense has allowed on the ground. Like, we've been getting there with Eckler for both reasons, for his touchdowns mostly, but he's averaging 7.5 catches per game since week 2 in the receiving range of the field. But then look at what Seattle's allowed on the ground, and Eno Benjamin only reaching 37 yards, but it's because overshadowed by Kyler Murray's 100-yard game last week. And then prior to that, both Alvin Kamara and Taysom Hill reached 100 yards. And then before them, Jamal Williams and Cordarrelle Patterson went over 100 yards individually as well. It was actually a career-high rushing performance for Cordarrelle Patterson in week 2. So they're just giving it up to everyone. So either way, whether we get the Chargers passing game, like Austin Eckler is still arguably the best running back on the slate.
Feels like this might be the lowest that Everett's been. Well, he was 3.7 last week. Okay, he's 4K. Feels kind of cheap for Everett. By the way, for what it's worth, 1% he's showing up in 1% of lineups. That's Austin Eckler on a Wednesday night. Optimal lineups, of course, he's going to be higher than that, but he's not, the right way to build on a Wednesday night, if that makes sense. If you're considering about
Brandon Cooks and Greg Dulcich fit Eckler in the optimal, so I agree.
Well, we live in the world of a salary cap, and that's why Brandon Cooks is in there. Seattle, the Kenneth Walker show. Kenneth Walker is certainly going to be played a good bit. He's going to be really, really popular this week, basically claiming that backfield. What was it, like 2/3, John? I think Dallas had some of the third down stuff or most of the third down stuff. Otherwise, Walker was the man.
Yes, DJ Dallas still ran just one more route than Ken Walker, but it doesn't matter. As Rich called him, like Ken Walker is that dude. Profiled amazing, has that dead step we all like where it looks like a strut almost, and then he just explodes forward. But overall, 21 of 23 backfield touches for Ken Walker. Like he is basically an every down back. If this is a competitive game, you would imagine he's involved throughout anyhow. So the Chargers, since they are allowing the second most yards after contact per attempt for the type of profile Walker offers, it's just an amazing game for even skinny stacks for the running backs. Yeah,
he hit the threshold for my I basically cut it off on DK at about 70%, and that's what he hit. He basically hit the threshold there. Playerprofiler.com, Rich, who is the closest comp to Kenneth Walker? He was awesome.
Let's see. It's a fun game to play. He had a ridiculous speed score. He was like 211 pounds, and I think he was like 90th percentile. So it's probably a pretty good player.
This player may have stolen somebody else's nickname. It was already clearly somebody else's, but somebody else gave him this. And then depending on how old you are, these initials are a certain person.
That's not helping me.
Oh my God. You're going to hate yourself.
I probably will.
John, feel free to play at any moment.
I don't know. I was actually going to say Rashad Penny. I thought Matt Kelly was just going to play the fun game.
Who is LT to you?
LT? Oh, yeah.
Like who is, depending on how old you are, right?
I mean, yeah. Well, Lawrence Taylor's the original T, and then, LaDainian.
Well, yeah, he was pretty good. But like you said, he comes from good stock, right? High expectations, great pedigree, all those adjectives. Seattle receivers, good Lord, man. Just
when we thought it was safe.
Yeah, just when both reached the top 12.
A lot of smart guys last week were like in cash games. We're saying, because it's kind of the way things worked on DK, the way the build worked. It's like, well, we can play both, DK and Tyler. And I don't know what the breakup's going to be, but combined, they'll get like 45. It could be, 30, 15 or whatever, 40. It could be, 17, 20. Well, they both completely just stunk. It was a disaster. It was terrible.
We talked about last week, though, DK being a guy to avoid.
Who's going to bounce back this week? Or is it going to be both of them, Rich? Who do you prefer amongst the two?
This week on paper, because none of these things tend to always work out like that because, Lockett didn't get there either last week. But I think DK has the better matchup this week. He still, had, 23% team target share. He has at least 20% of team targets in every game this year. He leads the team in target share and targets per route run. But the Chargers are allowing 8.6 yards per target and 22.7 PPR points per game to opposing wide receivers on the boundary. That's 16th and 20th. They've also allowed 5 touchdowns to opposing wide receivers on the boundary. That's 24th. They did end up benching J.C. Jackson just outright on Monday night. So maybe he was just a part of it, so maybe just benching him relieves some of those numbers, but they've been really good against opposing slot receivers. And Lockett's not like a pure slot. He still plays 60% of his snaps still on the outside too. So it's not like he's like Jacoby Myers, right? And it's just like jammed in. So he can still take advantage of some of that stuff that I talked about for DK too. It's just that DK is inherently out there a lot more wide than Lockett is, but I would edge DK bouncing back more this week, but we've been down this road before.
Didn't they just pay J.C. Jackson like a pile of money? Did I miss that? Is that correct? Like, he's already getting benched?
Yeah, that's correct. I believe he's Pro Football Focus's second lowest graded cornerback in coverage this year.
Oh, boy. Yeah, I guess that'll do it, I suppose. We
when
did.
he gave up the big plays, Brand Staley did him no favors after the game. Like, didn't even hide it. Like, the Dulcich play was his assignment, and then he had another play where I think it was KJ Hamler. He ended up not being a touchdown, but just like it was his assignment too. Like that huge play Russ had, which could have been a touchdown, but wasn't.
John, anything else as far as Metcalf versus Lockett? We sort of touched about the quarterbacks in passing. Do you have a preference if you're going to stack this game? Who do you want to start with? You want to start with Herbert? Or you want to start with Geno?
I think I would still take a chance on Herbert because at least we're getting the volume. And yes, all the results have been ugly. But I'd still like, if I'm going to play Eckler, at least I would like to carry along Herbert contrarian that way. And also, I would not play Noah Fant. I really don't understand how he keeps popping when, like, I understand he tied for a team high in targets last week, but like the rates don't change behind the scenes. He's ran around on 58.5% of their dropbacks the past 2 weeks, which is very similar to 57% he ran in week 1. Like, it really, they use 3 tight ends. I don't get it.
Yeah. I'm looking at that too. I pulled that same thing up. I was curious why. And yeah, like I don't have the actual routes run, but like snap rate is not changed basically. It's the same. Disley actually ran an extra, was on the field a little bit more, and then Parkinson is the third guy, just lurks as well too. And yeah, I don't get it. And he's not like 2.5, he's like 3K, whatever. I mean, I'm not saying you can't play him, but I'm not enthused about it. I'm guessing you're not enthused either, Rich, as far as Noah Fant.
No, not for DFS. I mean, really not at anywhere.
Well, not DFS, then what?
Like, yeah, no, not at anywhere. Not in any capacity. I'd rather even stream someone else if you had Goddard on bye or who else is ever on bye this week. I think there's another good tight end on bye. Oh, I guess by default, Tyler Higbee has been a good tight end this year.
When you're ranking your tight end season long, what's like tight end 10? What does tight end 10 look like?
Oh, it's terrible every week. Like when cause we rank players every week, and it's gross by the time we get to that level. Terrible.
Like, Connor Hayward was a top 12 tight end last week. That's where we're at right now.
Should I know who Connor Hayward is?
But like dudes like Everett like live there, right? Where you're just like every week it's like, dude, it's like, you know what? I don't really think Everett's been that good. I don't want to keep playing him. And when you just like rank tight ends, it's just like, oh, I guess Gerald Everett's around here. Like Evan Ingram, right? Like Evan Ingram's right around there. He hasn't really done anything, but just same area. He's getting targets. Like any tight ends that just getting targets is half the battle.
For all the uniform.
All I know is that Kyle Pitts got to 87 yards and T.J. Hawkinson had a career high receiving yards against the Seattle defense. So if Donald Parham's out, I'm paying up for the 1% away from the optimal Noah Fant for Gerald Everett.
Yeah. And 4K is not even that extravagant.
No.
Where's Taysom in the season long rankings for tight ends? Like, is he around 10 or higher?
He's still number 3 in points per game. But even though he has 3 games now as a top 3 tight end, you got to play, like, in order to catch those games, you have to play his floor, and his floor is below the top 30. So you just gotta ride the wave. If you don't want Taysom at his worst, you can't have him at his best.
Yeah, you gotta commit. You gotta commit to it.
Better in best ball. At least that's what is that one of the classic? Yeah. You love to have him in best ball. People are taking those victory laps on Twitter for sure. Game number 3 of our 3 games: Kansas City, San Francisco. San Fran getting 3 points. 48.5 is the total. Well, John, do you want to play whack-a-mole with these Kansas City receivers? We saw Juju had a nice night now last time out. We saw MVS with a big fat 0. Of course, you can always just play Travis Kelce. He's pretty good too if you have the salary. Well, what's your thoughts as far as the Kansas City offense?
It's like Rich talked about last week too. Juju was the only one being consistent with at least 8 targets in 4 or 5 games played, but the results hadn't followed. And then the one time he sees 5 targets, the results just explode because that's the game we're playing here. Another game, though, that comes down to the injury report, because the Chiefs in the toughest matchup, undoubtedly, they'll play all year against the Bills, still averaged over 6 yards per play. Mahomes had 8 completions of 15 yards in that game, finishes the QB5 on the week, despite only scoring 20 points in the box score. And you look at this 49ers injury report, this defense that last week, even the Falcons averaged over 6 yards per play against. And that's not to take away from Arthur Smith, who is calling an amazing offense with no fantasy relevance whatsoever. But the defense is just a shade of themselves. I mean, maybe we get Nick Bosa back. maybe this week, but still, Eric Armstead, Javon Kinlaw, Emmanuel Mosley, Jimmy Ward, Chardavius Ward, Drake Jackson, who was starting in place of those other cornerbacks. Like, it's bad right now. So there's a real opportunity here for practically everyone in the Chiefs offense to get there. The 49ers have actually called the second highest rate of 8-man boxes as well to stop the run. So you would think the Chiefs play it safe as well and just methodically move their way down the field with the high points per receptions for their receivers.
You say everybody's got a shot, but there's nobody you feel like you need. I mean, of course, Kelsey, but otherwise, like CEH is not really getting. I think he's got some positive touchdown equity, right? I've been kind of lucky there. Juju's been fine, but MBS and Hardman, and it can be so many different guys. Do you have a preference here, Rich, as far as the KC offensive pieces? Who do you want to pair with Mahomes, if anybody?
I mean, you just got to play Kelsey if you're going to do that. But I mean, you talked about Dak and like Carr being like the optimal cash game guys. I think it's pretty clearly Patrick Mahomes as the optimal cash game guy, because we've seen like none of these guys, like some of these guys can't get there, right? Like it's been a have and have not quarterback season. And if the field is reduced to just Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes being the only guys that really have like 30-point ceilings, and Patrick Mahomes comes with like an inherent floor. I mean, he was just the top 6 scorer against the Bills. I think he's pretty clearly like, if you're talking about just for like from a cash game stance, like he's pretty clearly the quarterback that you play this week. Yeah.
I mean, ideally you do your absolute best to get there.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that. And it's not that much more. And again, things change as the week progresses. We'll see how tight the cap is, in reality when Sunday rolls around. And again, there's a lot of players we talked about you're just not even available to play this week. So what are you even saving salary for? You might as well spend on the really, really good quarterback if you can get the really, really good quarterback and figure out the rest.
And the 49ers have like their metrics all look good, but they face Justin Fields, Geno Smith, Russell Wilson, Matthew Stafford, Baker Mayfield, and Marcus Mariota. And Mariota threw for 9 yards per pass attempt against them last week. Like, it's not like these dudes have been like the 85 Bears, like shutting down like amazing offenses. Like, and maybe that's just the case for the NFL this season in general. Like, who has played a hard schedule, right? All these teams suck.
Who's good? Yeah.
Like, so maybe we shouldn't even care about this, like who anyone's played, because everyone's bad.
Yeah, it is so wild. If you had to pair somebody with Mahomes, Rich, and it's not Kelsey, who would it be?
I mean, just gotta be Juju, man. Like, he's the only dude like that has had like any shade of consistency or a floor, right? Like, because even like Juju probably is not gonna be like the player like people thought. Like, people had whispers like he could be this year's Cooper Kupp, right? He just doesn't have any kind of explosion anymore. But like, he's still like he's still floating around, like turning in like wide receiver, like 35 to 40 games. It's not like the dude is like putting up zeros and donuts every week.
What do you have as far as San Francisco, Rich?
Yeah, I mean, this is the side that's probably the most interesting for DFS this week, because the 49ers are now a bottom 5 team in, EPA rushing the football, DVOA rushing the football. Like Daigle said, you look at what their defensive situation is last week, and it forced them into just this completely negative game script where they have to throw the football, which they've got talent. Like, when they have to throw the football close to 40 times, like, they're really good players that like they have to throw the football to, which is pretty nice, right? Like, we like when Brandon Ayuk can get 11 targets, and we haven't been able to get that. The whole reason like we haven't been able to play Brandon Ayuk consistently is because 20% of the 49ers targets are like 6 targets a game. We're in a situation where not only are they going to have to chase points inherently, because even at the 49ers best version of their defense, the Chiefs are going to score. If it's the worst version of the 49ers defense, they're going to score even more. The Chiefs are facing 41 pass attempts per game, and they're allowing their 29th in passing points allowed per attempt. So they're bad per attempt and facing a lot of attempts. Quite the cocktail, right? They've allowed 5 top 10 scoring weeks to opposing quarterbacks. Everyone's been a top 15 scorer against them. Jimmy Garoppolo already has back-to-back top 10 scoring weeks in fantasy. So like, he has to by default kind of be in play here. And then the Chiefs are just getting,
You like that price, 5.5?
Yeah, why not?
All right, yeah. No,
I mean,
he's cheap.
Yeah, I mean, look at every quarterback that's faced the Chiefs. They face some pretty good guys, but like, everyone's getting there, and they're another team. They've got a bunch of injuries on the outside, right? Like we saw against the Bills, like they're down to guys they signed off the practice squad the game before. So we'll see if like Fenton comes back and McDuffie comes back. But if they're out again, like Debo, Ayuk are going to be in a situation where their target shares actually matter. Because it's really cool to cite target share, right? And targets per route run. But like ask a lot of people that have Drake London if that shit matters, like when your team's throwing 20 passes, right? And that's always been the case with the 49ers, right? It's always been Kittle's bugaboo. It's been Ayuk's bugaboo. Like the 49ers, are when they're throwing 26 to 27 passes per game, what is a 28% target share, right? But now if we're going to get 40 pass attempts, you saw against the Falcons, right? Like everyone gets there. When have we ever had a game where Debo Samuel, George Kittle, and Brandon Ayuk all get double-digit targets? Like that happened last week, and it could happen again here.
John, which do you care about more? And I agree. Give me raw targets before, will you get 20% of the pie? Well, how big is the pie? That's more important for me. Which do you care about? Obviously, both are useful to some degree.
Yeah, and it's our job to know both. Like, for instance, you can look at 49ers being a top 5 defense in man coverage, then you can say, okay, well, Mecole Hardman has recorded 60% of his targets and at least an over 2 yards per route run against man coverage this year. But at the same time, you then look at Mecole Hardman's targets, and he hadn't seen more than 6 in any game. So, like, you really don't care overall about what he's getting, especially since he's had 2 games with just 1 target. And so, yeah, we just compile everything. But overall, I even played Brandon Ayuk in a couple bad spots on redraft teams last week just because of the 49ers injury report. Like, you could tell from the beginning there was absolutely a week they were going to be a negative game script and have to throw. And that's where we're at again this week. And it could be, like Rich said, George Kittle even double-digit targets week. The first time ever on the season last week that he ran around on over 80%, 87% of dropbacks, he reached 96%. Like the best threshold ever, unless he was at 100% dropback. So I like all of them. The interesting note is that even though Debo Samuel is averaging a 27% target share this year and from Jimmy Garoppolo, we have 3 consecutive games now where his running back usage has essentially been taken away, where the past 3 games, he hasn't had more than 2 carries in any game. So he has become a wide receiver. Now, it is still Debo Samuel. Like he's still a 1-for-1 talent. So it's a player, especially in a week after Brandon Ayuk scores 2 touchdowns, that I still want to bet on Debo Samuel and like squeeze him into double stacks perhaps. And so that's kind of the approach I'm taking for tournaments.
What do you guys make of this line? You're talking about the 49ers being all beat up, and I know going from 2.5 to 3 is a big deal, and the Vegas is still hanging on. KC minus 2.5. They won't make it 3 just yet. Does that stink to you? Does that smell to you, John? What's going on there? What's up with that line?
A little bit, because I'm not even intrigued really to play the rushing game here. And remember, we had opportunities to play Jeff Wilson in weeks 3 and 4, and he did handle 97% of their running back carries in that span because that was without Tyrion Davis-Price and Tevin Coleman. But then the past 2 weeks with Tevin Coleman involved, Jeff Wilson has only handled 66% of their running back carries because Tevin Coleman, even though he's not providing standalone value, is a nuisance. Davis-Price was also active last week, but he just played 1 snap as a fullback. So maybe they get him involved as well. So really, we can only cross our fingers, assume the game script, and bank on the passing game here.
John, your favorite pairing with Jimmy G is who?
I think it's Debo Samuel for all the reasons I mentioned. Just on a week where Ayuk explodes and reaches a ceiling game, I think I'm just going to play the opposite this week.
We got anything else in this game, boys, or shall I move on?
I mean, also, what if you just played Mahomes with the 49ers pass catchers?
Sure.
That's a different way of doing Mahomes. For sure.
Yeah.
I think my best lineup last week had Josh Allen by himself. And like a couple of guys on KC. I can't remember what it was exactly. I don't remember the reason why I did it, but there's some logic behind it. And, it just sort of worked out that way. I don't think any of his pass catchers. Well, no, Diggs was good, but didn't necessarily need him. But theoretically, you want to have, a pass catcher with your quarterback, especially if they're not a quarterback.
On DraftKings, I don't think small or large field had Juju, even though Juju came in at 4%. It was Burrow, Chase, Andrews, whereas FanDuel, it was Diggs and Allen in winning tournament lineups.
I think it was Allen and Juju in the same lineup. I think that's actually what I had. I think that was my best lineup there. Just sort of worked out that way.
Yeah, I just say that from the angle of not playing Jimmy Garoppolo.
Sure.
Yeah. No, I get that. Yeah.
If I had known, though, I saw the percentages. I kind of thought they were lying, but yeah, if I had known Mahomes and Juju were going to couple at 7%, then I probably would have played more of them.
Yeah, the ownership was pretty low in those guys, and I thought it would be higher as well. And I think Allen, of course, was the more dominant quarterback in that game from an ownership perspective, but it wasn't as high as expected, just the kind of the way it turned out. But
it won't be 7% this week.
No, I agree with that. There's less competition. Josh Allen's not playing. Hurts is not playing. Certainly a lot of good teams not on the slate. A lot of good spend ups as far as receivers as well. Going to give our favorite plays position by position in just a second. Before we do that, do want to mention Thrive. Join in on the fantasy prop action this NFL season with Thrive Fantasy. How does that work? It's an easy to play, no salary cap style contest. It revolves around over-under style player props. Each prop has a fantasy score associated with the prop. The riskier the prop, the higher the fantasy score. You rack up the most points for your share of the prize pool. We're going to give you a nice, sweet, fat deposit bonus. Use deposit bonus Grinders, GRINDERS, when you sign up for a deposit bonus up to $250, as well as free tickets. You get yourself 6 free $20 contest tickets if you deposit $500. You deposit between $100 and $499. You get 2 free $20 contest tickets. Terms and conditions do apply. Check out the RotoGrinders review page for Thrive Fantasy in the description for more. Producer Steve should have some of the picks that are up on the board. I just picked this from the main contest they have there. It's a $100,000 prize. There's other things you can do on Thrive, obviously, but there's a $100,000 prize pool, $20K to first. You got to pick 10 of these 20. You got to take a stand on 10 of these 20 props. Rich, is there anybody that's standing out for you? And again, the riskier you want to be with your stand, the more points you're rewarded. How ambitious do you want to be? Who do you like?
The first one that stands out to me is this Chris Godwin receiving yardage. We saw him last week, have the 95 yards, had the 12 targets. Carolina is 28th in yards per target allowed to opposing slot receivers. They're 29th in catch rate allowed to opposing slot receivers as well. So I like that Chris Godwin 61.5 right off rip.
That's a pretty good call. I like that. And you're getting 100 points for it. It's even money either way, 100 points over, 100 points under. See that and raise it, John. What do you have as far as who's standing out for you?
All right. You fooled me twice, Brady, but we're pot committed. So Brady over 2.5 passing touchdowns. Ooh. That means Leonard Fournette can catch 3 and we still get there. So I won't necessarily lose. But the reason, Brady the last 3 weeks now with everyone healthy has averaged 48 pass attempts per game. The touchdown just haven't been there. Even last week, they had 4 red zone possessions. They kicked 3 field goals out of it. So they haven't been finishing drives. Nonetheless, the attempts have been there as they cannot run the ball whatsoever. And so I'm still going to go back to Brady, and we're going to go back to Mike Evans too. We like Chris Godwin. But for the same narrative we painted last week where Godwin wouldn't play in the second half, you can foresee that in this game. Since last week, the Panthers, with P.J. Walker, who's expected to start again this week, cleared from the injury report, only completed 1 pass over 5 yards and had a negative ADOT on the week. Not good.
Wow. I was hoping somebody would take DJ Moore over on touchdowns. Nobody wants to be that ambitious.
I mean, you got to reach 60 yards one time before we start talking about your touchdowns.
All right, let's run it back. As far as your favorite quarterbacks, anybody stand out, John, that we should point out here as far as the slate?
We can go to Rich. I already said Tom Brady. I spoiled it.
Yeah, I mean, those guys are all still in play. Brady, we talked about Mahomes. Lamar is still on a short slate. He's still one of the few apex guys out there that could get you 30. He hasn't lately, especially the last 3 weeks. A regression immediately came from Lamar Jackson. After those first 2 games, because it was weeks 2 and 3 that he had those just went nuclear. But the last 3 games, regression has come from. He hasn't made a QB1 score in any of the past 3 weeks, and we saw his splits versus the blitz immediately regress from where they were the first 3 weeks to these 3 weeks. But still, he's running around a lot. The Browns aren't good at all. We saw them again last week. Bailey Zappi, they got zapped. So it's a good matchup for Lamar. He's at home. moderate team total. It all looks good. Big favorite, like all the layout you would look for like an optimal run out for a quarterback to score a bunch of points. So he's in play as well. Yeah, I don't know if we'll get to guys like Matt Ryan or something on this slate.
Not chasing those 50 attempts or 60 attempts.
I mean, it's just, for season long, I think he's like definitely in a streaming play, but like for DFS, am I going to get there? Probably not. It's a great matchup against the Titans, but we talked about even like, it's hard for me to even get to Jimmy G, even though I love that spot, right? Like, so to get to Matt Ryan is like another bridge that I've got to cross. Same thing with Rodgers, right? Like Rodgers has a great matchup, but I think I'd rather play the receivers for the Packers than even take a shot on Rodgers at this point. Let me just play like Lazard and Romeo Doubs, and I'll get my way through that.
That's where I'm at too. I don't see a need for it. I have a hard time.
Yeah.
I initially came in looking at Ryan too. Like, since the Titans where they struggles on deep passes, they allow explosive plays through the air. But
they just play Alec Pierce.
But Ryan only threw 2 deep passes last week. And what's his total at on the year now? What, 9 total? 11 total? I don't know. It's
Michael Pittman's longest target this season is 17 yards downfield.
There you go. See,
that's terrible.
And last week, it's cool. Like, if you're going to give him 16 targets, you can use him. Like, that's fine. If you want to use him like Jacoby Myers, if we're going to get that many targets. But even last week, his depth of target, nothing changed for Michael Pittman. 4.5 yards downfield. 94% of his targets were within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. He ran 58 routes. 26 of them were slants or hitches. Like, it's been the story all year. He missed a game and still leads the NFL in hitch routes.
Which is why Paris Campbell was finally involved for a career high in targets, because now they move to this quick hitting scheme where all they do is throw at the line of scrimmage.
Well, they also didn't have Jonathan Taylor.
That's true too. Yeah.
If you had over 1.5 Paris Campbell mentions in this show, like, cash your tickets. Congratulations. He's hit twice so far on this show. Hey, a question here, Rich. Is there a correlation? Like, so Cleveland's been a horrific team defensively against the run. Is there a correlation when it comes to running quarterbacks as well? I'm thinking about Lamar, or that depends on scheme and it depends on other factors. Like, you're batting against the run. But, yeah, okay, go ahead.
I've never really looked at it on individual stance. I mean, Lamar's getting a lot of designed runs, so you would hope that there would be some implication there where it's like, unlike Justin Fields, right? Like Justin Fields doing like all his like stuff is scrambling. That hasn't really been Lamar's game, but I haven't really done enough research into it. I mean, the Browns got those 2 light tackles. I mean, and then they've been missing. Clowney's just been in and out of the lineup. But the way the structure of the defense is, they have those 2 smaller defensive tackles, and that's just where teams have been killing them on the inside.
We're going to segue here to running back. And since I have you, I mean, are we chasing Kenny Drake? Is Kenny Drake possibly a thing, or is that just on a one?
Well, Justice Hill practiced today, so at minimum, like Justice Hill could be back, and then at maximum, both Dobbins and Gus Edwards maybe is a longer shot to play too. So like,
stay tuned.
It's a like maybe see what we're going into, but like it's pretty messy right now. Calling it from 96 hours out.
Yeah. If it's cluttered, ignore it. Yeah, we'll see if it gets interesting later on in the week. What about running backs you actually like on a Wednesday night? What do you have, Rich?
This slate is jammed with running backs. Like, it's running backs are starting to fight back, right? Like, it was a couple weeks. It was a couple weeks to start the year. It was like, oh man, like every running back just looks dead, and they've punched their way back. These early round running backs are fighting back because there's a lot of great guys. I mean, if you can afford it, like Derrick Henry, we just saw 3 weeks ago he had 150 yards and a touchdown against the Colts, right? He's getting the ball in the passing game a little bit, so we like that. DraftKings still refuses to price Breece Hall as an RB1. Like, the dude's just like $6K, and then it's another Josh Jacobs chalk week. I mean, to be fair, like only Christian McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley have a larger share of their backfield touches than Josh Jacobs, and he's getting this a huge favorite at home against the Houston Texans. Like, he's 8,500 on FanDuel, but on DraftKings he's 6,500, and then he has 5 catches in each of his past 3 games too, like to go with all this rushing efficiency. He's probably going to be easily the highest owned guy. Crazy chalk on draft.
Him and Leonard Fournette, I think, will naturally be played just because of their spots.
Walker, Jacobs, if you have the Fournette's an awesome play too. And you mentioned Hall on DK, just whatever reason.
Not a great matchup, but really cheap.
Yeah. What's 6-2 on DK, 7-6 on FanDuel.
And matchups might not matter for a guy like Breece Hall. Like,
yeah. Your thoughts as far as running back here, John?
The best part about it too is that the 3 or 4 running backs we were decided from last week, like they were chalk because it was condensed to the 4 cheapest players. This week, it's at least spread out everywhere. So I don't expect there to be like Jacobs will be chalk relative to the slate, but there won't be a 35 to 40% Ramondre Stevenson here, at least right now, anyways, on a Wednesday. So that makes it a lot easier to grasp and play. I still like Joe Mixon. I think that game's pretty high scoring. Even though he only handled 12 touches in this past game, that was still 75% of the team's backfield touches. So I like Joe Mixon quite a bit. They also altered what they do on offense against the Saints. You know, Jamar Chase even got there from that out route and then broke a tackle and ran for the deep touchdown. But overall, the Bengals went with the highest rate of shotgun in the league this past week, and that allowed Joe Mixon over 2 yards before contact per rush. It actually gave him room and gave Burrow room to operate as well. And I think they continue doing that to give themselves like more space and create more explosive plays. And so I do like Joe Mixon quite a bit too.
John, you want to hit up some receivers? Again, we talked about a lot of the good receivers aren't playing this week. Who's catching your eye that's actually available?
We talked about Mike Evans. It's a game where, again, Chris Godwin can definitely get there, but we expect him to be benched in the second half since the Panthers averaged 4.4 yards per play. They are absolutely a miserable existence of an NFL team. And then Rich hinted at it, but yeah, Allen Lazard has been the one constant recently for the Packers and an immaculate spot against the Commanders. Allen Lazard the past 3 games has averaged 8 targets and a 20.5% target share. Like he's out there running deep routes against a team allowing deep passes. So I'm kind of focusing my pool around those 2 as well as the receivers we already talked about.
It's a pretty appealing combination. Rich, receiver for you, and just out of curiosity, if you have a big spend, is it Chase or is it Adams?
Oh, Adams for sure for me, just because the matchup, that home team total, like it all just lines up. I mean, Houston's been getting really beat up on the outside as opposed to slot guys, and we saw that again right before their bye when Christian Kirk did nothing. Desmond King's been he made like 3 ridiculous pass breakups in that game too. So yeah, I mean, I would lean towards Adams versus chasing the points from Chase. But I have no problem like playing Chase with Burrow again. Like no issues with that too. I'm not trying to say like Chase is a bad play through that. I just prefer Adams a little bit there. DraftKings, not a lot of cheap guys have opened up yet. I'm sure we'll probably get there by the time we set lineups. But I mentioned Alec Pierce. He looks pretty interesting over there. Maybe on both sites too. But he's still running a fewer percentage of routes than Paris Campbell, but he's still been getting there, right? Like we saw this with George Pickens for a little bit, like where Pickens was getting ramped up, but like still was getting there for fantasy. And that's what we've had with Pierce the last 3 weeks. Matchup is good. The Titans are one of the worst teams in the league defending boundary receivers and deep balls. It didn't work for us with Terry McLaurin. It was Diami Brown week that week. So maybe instead of Michael Pittman, we're going to get like transitive property here, and it'll be like he's the Diami Brown of this week, Alec Pierce. But I think he's on DraftKings. He looks pretty appealing as like a salary, like the guy to open up some things until we get later in the week. You guys mentioned Lazard, both Packers. I think Romeo Doubs too. He's out there getting a lot of burn out there. Just the targets haven't found him the last 2 weeks. I doubt Robert Tunyon's going to catch 10 passes very often. So I like that one as well. And yeah, that all sounds good to me. I don't know if I missed someone. I probably did.
It's for being an ugly slate or for being a slate that lacks the top heavy options, like all the confident options are mid to high price. That's what makes it a little confusing when you're building lineups.
Hunter Renfrow is kind of like the mid kind of sort of cheap receiver that's sort of popping right now, that sounds spectacular.
Lowest depth of target in the NFL, Hunter Renfrow.
Is it really?
It's lower than Curtis Samuels even.
Yeah, it's hard to get enthused. John, you mentioned Godwin might sit the second half. So was that the real thing? I know Beats were talking about it in week 5 when he only put 52% of snaps. Is that because they were just ahead so much and they decided to basically sit him because he played 89% last week? Is that
right?
The thought process?
I assume so. He played 6 snaps in the second half 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And then in a competitive game last week, like they didn't care about his load at all. So I would just assume that was the reason why.
Okay. Yeah. I wanted to make sure, just like, that was the thought process there. And that sort of played through last week, 89% of the snaps. Anybody else?
Last week showed that we're very bad at predicting that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah. Last week showed that the NFL is bad.
We knew that, though, man.
You're right. We did know that.
But do we have any takeaways as far as Wan'Dale Robinson? I think they kind of babied him a little bit as far as his snaps, right, Rich?
He just probably didn't play enough. I mean, he's a nice swing if you need to make it. Like you said, I think he's right. He's not like super cheap though. I think he's 45 on DraftKings.
The time to make it was last week, honestly, when he was Stone Man. I almost got there too, but if I would have got there, it would have been Lamar, so it wouldn't have mattered anyways.
But you just hope to see more. He's more, like I said, shot in the dark though. I mean, he only played 23% of snaps, ran around 34% of the dropbacks. He got the touchdown.
Though, right?
What's that?
Doesn't it have to jump or no?
Well, yeah, you would think so, but he also is kind of a niche player too, right? Like he's a pure slot guy and he's going to be a pure slot guy. So they have to always be an 11 personnel, and they've kind of not been as much of an 11 personnel team by product of the players that they've had to field at wide receiver this year. And they've kind of swerved into this like Saquon, offense. So yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with it. It's just, like I said, you're taking on a player that you don't know where the snap count lies.
Daniel Jones only averaging 26 pass attempts per game. I've had people ask me for the redraft streets. It's like, where do you rank Matt Breida among the contingency running backs to stash? And it's like, buddy, if Saquon goes down, like this offense is done. Like they run everything through him.
They run 5 receivers. Not one of them got more than 69% of snaps last week. And Slayton, Marcus Johnson, and there's Richie James and Sills. Like, yeah, maybe it's just all sort of nonsense.
2 weeks ago, Daniel Jones got injured, and their response was putting Saquon at quarterback for Wildcat. That's what they do. That's not going to be Matt Breida Wildcat.
Well, that tells you everything about Daniel Jones. So Daniel Jones has the most amount of pass attempts outside of the pocket. They move everything. So they didn't play Daniel Jones in that game because he asked to come back in the game, but because they don't want to have a straight drop back game because they can't pass protect at any level. Mm-hmm. Like they were like, we can't put you back there. Like if you're hot, we need to move the pockets. They just went and played Wildcat offense. That was so telling of like what the situation is there for that offense right now. That they couldn't even put him in to just have a straight drop back passing game. They're like, nah, we'd rather just run the Wildcat.
Brian Dable's amazing. That's the worst 5-1 team ever to exist, but Brian Dable's amazing.
I'm just seeing. I didn't realize Denver Jets was bet down to 38. It was open 38.5. Nope, too high.
And we learned last week through PJ Walker, like the situation can always be worse. So if Brett Rypien ends up playing, like don't just think like it can't be better, right? Like it's got to be better because that PJ Walker game that wasn't even real football. Like
every time you looked up, someone was running behind the line of scrimmage with the ball. And I thought the stats were lying, but they were not lying. He literally just threw behind the line of scrimmage. It was
Christian
amazing.
McCaffrey's having one of the most amazing seasons in context of like surrounding offense. It's absolutely insane that like he's still getting there.
We didn't mention him in passing. He's worth mentioning, I suppose, right? But it's unlikely he scores 2 touchdowns. He certainly can, and touchdowns matter. He can get there via like 100 receiving yards and 11 catches. But he's on the slate. He hasn't been traded as of this podcast. Is that going to happen, or is that just all nonsense?
No, he's not. Have you seen his contract?
Yeah, who's trading for a thoroughly expensive run? And so supposedly they wanted at least 1 first rounder for him. Like, get out of town. What are you talking about? Sometimes you find every once in a while you get that GM.
We've done this with the NFL for the last decade with the trade deadline. Like the only guys that like get moved are like mid or low level guys, right? Or like veterans. Like you see like some vets get moved, but we never see like splash trades, right? Like Amari Cooper was like the best we ever got, right?
Yeah. Or if you get an argument in the sidelines, Robbie Anderson moves or something like that. But
like Robbie Anderson's been like good for what? Like look at his in the context of careers. Like, are we qualifying Robbie Anderson as like a really good player?
No. It was 8 games in the second half when Sam Darnold returned from injury. May not even be 8. I think it was 4 actually, where Robbie Anderson made his entire career. Kind of like the 8 games Devontae Parker made of his career with Ryan Fitzpatrick whenever Preston Williams got injured. That's why I don't think DJ Moore gets traded either. Like that's an organization that just extended him a couple months ago.
He just signed a contract extension.
Yeah.
He's one of their best young players. Like they're not, and they got DJ Moore in a relative deal compared to the other contracts that were given out to wide receivers this offseason. Like there's no way they're trading him.
I still wish.
Go ahead.
I'd say I still wish you could get over 60 yards or be more than the wide receiver 65 in fantasy points per game. But yeah, I agree. They're not going to trade him.
Oh, you can't play him like in fantasy.
No,
but,
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, what they did with PJ Walker, that is the most deplorable offensive approach I've ever seen in a football game. Like it was worse than the Kendall Hinton game.
Like I said earlier, they completed one pass of over 5 air yards. One, it was 6 air yards, and 2, it wasn't PJ Walker. It was Jacob Eason in the final quarter. Like they didn't try with PJ Walker, who's going to start again this week, mind you, against a tougher defense, is in the lineup. It's bad.
John, this is why we watch Red Zone, and you're not subjected to watching PJ Walker.
I need the context of PJ Walker's throws -3 yards deep.
You can't just see it on paper. That's not good enough for you.
Honestly, that's probably the one time I could have seen it on paper and been just fine with it.
You want to subject yourself.
Yeah. Chris McCaffrey deserves an award though for what he's doing.
I agree.
Yeah, he's gonna get. I wonder what his over/under for receptions is this week, because I would imagine a bunch of balls thrown his way once again. And well, good luck to him against Tampa Bay, playing some catch up. 10-point dogs there, 15-point team total. We got to finish strong with tight end.
They're not getting it. They're not scoring 15.
That's an egregious number. Rich, you want tight ends? I mean, Mark Andrews playing, and Waller, we'll see. We talked about Pitts, not glowingly. And then we talked about all the cheap nonsense earlier. If you want to rehash that, by all means. But we should finish strong in theory, but tight ends, go for it.
No, I think we covered pretty much everyone. Like, if you want to pay up, you've got Andrews and Kelsey still as legit hammers. I think we'll see Dulcich be pretty popular cash game. Like I said, it always could be worse. He only had 3 targets, and Brett Rippon may not be the answer either. So he got him. We might get Otten. You rattled off all the other guys. Like, it's pretty well covered.
John?
It's practically what Rich said. It just feels like, even though, like I mentioned, I do like Everett in a unique tournament spot, it just feels like paying up for Everett and not getting to Andrews or Kelsey is going to absolutely end my soul. So I probably still try to find a way to Kelsey or Andrews.
On a Wednesday night, John, do you have a favorite game stack, a favorite just stack in general, a favorite lean that you're kind of looking at that's standing? We probably talked about it already, but feel free to reiterate or bring a point home.
Bucks, Onslaught, no Panthers run back, or having faith in the Chargers with Ezekiel Elliott.
You like Brady paired with Fournette and one of his pass catchers?
I do, yeah. Or Godwin and Evans, or Otten with one of the receivers.
You say Onslaught. What about throwing the defense in there too, just for fun?
That's not for fun, like, because PG Walker's not going to have fun.
The problem is, it's just like, because at some point Tampa's just going to chill, and then if you have the Onslaught, maybe you pump the brakes on Godwin if we expect the same thing to happen that happened a couple weeks ago, or maybe they just let him chill in the second half. Just a thought, but
he can get there. He can get there in the first half.
Yes, yeah, he only needs one half against his Carolina team. See that stack, Rich, and raise it. What do you got?
No, I like that. I like the games we talked about. I still feel like something's going to happen in that Green Bay Washington game. I haven't quite figured out what, but
that's my feeling too.
And Cleveland, Baltimore, like these Cleveland games have been just blowing over the game total. Last week they didn't help it get there. I mean, defensively, I guess they helped it get there. They didn't do their part on offense, but the Browns have sneakily had good moments too. So guys like Amari Cooper could still be in play, and Njoku, there could be something there too. And then Houston Raiders, obviously we didn't talk about. I actually thought Daigle was going to pick Houston Raiders, but that one didn't make it. But that is another game too that can probably get there as well.
We can't talk about. Well, there's 2 players on Houston
that's
we
true.
can talk about. That's it. Add Dameon Pierce, by the way, add him to the running back mix, since we have 12 running backs to choose from. The Texans haven't lost by more than 10 points in any game this year. So since week 2, we don't really have a good sample of if they would take Pierce off the field in true negative game script. But they were down 3 touchdowns. They were down 21-0 to the Chargers, and Pierce still ran more routes in that game than Burkhead. So, like, maybe Pierce, even in a blowout game script, maybe he's still a guy that gets there under roster because everyone thinks the Raiders, who aren't even good, just run over the Texans.
Yeah, and we got it. Rookies coming out of buys. It's usually you see the post buy bump for rookies later in the year. It's early in the season, but man, Pierce was an awesome pass protector at Florida. So like just him getting more opportunities. He's literally looking like he's gonna be a 3-down guy of sooner than later.
Given how much ownership Adams and Jacobs are going to roster, tacking on Pierce is probably a really good skinny stack way to go, not Cooks.
We never mentioned Tyler Heineke. Was that by design?
Do not mention him ever again.
That's it. We finished strong with Tyler Heineke. Do appreciate y'all listening to the Pick Six Show, week number 7. Appreciate our sponsor, Thrive. Always saying everybody knows who Hribar is. Everybody knows who Daigle is. But just in case there's one person out there listening, they want to know where they can follow your content. Daigle, tell the people.
If you're hanging around in the redraft streets, I'm still writing the waiver wire column every single week. And I bet if you DM me at NotJDaigle on Twitter, I can probably get you 25% off. I bet I can do that. So please come hang out. I'm still there every day, being tired. We're still here.
All right, Rich, same deal.
Yep. Sharp Football Analysis. You can find a worksheet over there, writing up these games, breaking them down, at Lord Reeves on Twitter. Listen, everyone, good luck again. Let's hit those cash lines and tip something over.
Let's do it. I'm at DFS _ Almanac on the Twitters if you all care. On behalf of Rich, on behalf of John, on behalf of producer Steve, on behalf of Paris Campbell, Rocco's Country. Let's ride. Appreciate y'all listening to the Pick Six Show. I was Dean. Take something down this week. We're out of here. Holler.